Gandy with Coming Clean. Today I have Macy as my special guest, and Macy has an amazing story that I'm going to let her share with us today. And this is where I did this on the spot, so bear with both of us. Hey, Macy.
Okay. My name's Macy. I was born here in Jacksonville, Florida, and I grew up in a Christian home. My dad led worship at our church. I went to church every Sunday, and I had a pretty good life growing up. I want to say around the age of 13 is when everything started changing for me. My parents got divorced, and around the same time, I had a really bad situation with my neighbor's brother and was raped, and it just caused a lot of discord in my family. And at that point, I just stopped trying to lead this nice, good life and went off in a different direction. At the same time, my mom started drinking and became an alcoholic, so she was letting me drink at home too. That was pretty much the extent of it, though. I would drink and I smoked marijuana a little bit. And then when I was 17, I met my son's dad, and I stayed with him for 7 years. During that time, he was extremely emotionally abusive and would just leave and come back all the time. So by the time I finally left him, I was willing to accept love from anybody at that point. That's when I met my daughter's dad, and he was extremely nice to me, so I was willing to overlook the fact that he had a drug problem. And within 3 months, I was also addicted to drugs and doing pain pills. I ended up losing my son and living in a camper at my dad's house. And my family had no idea what was going on at this point. I was asking them for money, and they were just giving it to me. I think they caught on when me and my daughter's dad both got an infection in our arms at the same time, and they kind of put two and two together and realized that it was from using like dirty needles or something like that. So they ended up confronting me, and they had no idea how to handle any of that, so they put me in a Suboxone program, thinking that that's what was going to get me clean. So I did that, and I did get clean for probably a year, and during that time I had my daughter.
You did your hands.
Yeah, because I don't consider Suboxone clean. I would consider doing nothing clean at this point. All Suboxone did was just mask the problem. Because when my insurance ran out and I couldn't do the Suboxone anymore, I had a much worse problem on my hands that pain pills couldn't solve, and that's whenever I turned to heroin. So, and I think had my family known that, they never would have done that in the first place. They would have just sent me to a detox program and just gotten me clean. So I ended up, like I said, when the insurance ran out, I ended up on heroin because that was the only thing that made me feel better. And at that point, I lost my daughter, my son, my house. During that year, I had started a business. I lost that too. I had 2 cars. I lost both of them. And I ended up homeless right here on 103rd Street, living in a tent in the woods. My daughter's dad was out there with me. He was also living in a tent in the woods, and he would have me walking up and down the streets to make us money so that we wouldn't be sick anymore. And that pretty much was the last 3 years of my life up until I finally decided to go to rehab. It was April 1st of 2018. I had just been beaten up and raped again, and I went back into the woods, and he was upset that I didn't bring him drugs, so he knocked me out, And then I woke up in the woods by myself and decided that I didn't want to live anymore. So I went and got more and decided to kill myself. And in that moment, like, can I be explicit with like how it all happened? So I tried to overdose, and when I put the needle in my arm, it broke off, and I ended up just screaming for God to help me. And I heard him tell me that if I gave up and decided to kill myself, he couldn't help me anymore, and to walk down here to Hands and Feet and they would help me. And so that's what I did. It was probably like a 2-mile walk from where my tent was, and I made it down here, and it was Easter Sunday of last year, and they drove me to detox. My family, I had no idea, like my family had completely stopped feeding me, giving me money, because for a long time that's what they did, and they realized that they were just spreading the problem out. When they stopped helping me, my life really hit rock bottom.
And that has a lot to do with a lot of us drug addicts, is people enabling us.
Yeah.
So how long from the time that your family quit enabling you
Oh, it was
to you wanted to give up, to where you, like, when you was done?
It was really quick. Like, it happened probably like in under 6 months. When my family stopped answering my phone calls, they stopped giving me money a long time ago, but they would still buy me food. But then they stopped buying me food because they knew if they bought me food, I would spend the money that I did have on drugs. So they stopped buying me food too. And I hadn't talked to them probably in 6 months. So when I came down here and you guys drove me to Gateway, I had no idea my family was bringing food down here to feed me. I just thought that they didn't care. But they had been coming down here and feeding me through here. So, I mean, it happened really quick though.
Yeah. And so I want to go back,
Okay.
because your childhood was really good.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people have this thing about drug addiction, that your childhood has a lot to do with you doing drugs. So your childhood not necessarily something that happened to you
Right.
in those 13 to 15 years that were really good.
Right.
Because you were really good. You got a scholarship to...
I had a scholarship to college. I played the violin. I was very musical. I was very involved in church. Didn't really give my parents a hard time until after that. It was only after that point that I really just veered off in a completely different direction. And I don't think I even really knew that was the reason until recently, whenever I dug back into my past. But
yeah, when things start still popping up.
Right, but there's plenty of people that I was in rehab with that, they have a really great life too. There's nothing that really led them to doing something like that or to choose a life in addiction. It can be just one thing that happens.
Yes, and you don't know how to deal with it.
Right.
So where did Jesus fit in?
Okay, so I think it really started whenever I cried out for God to help me and heard him, tell me to come get help. I also had never really read a Bible my entire life, and maybe not my first night in detox, because I think I slept for 2 days. But when I woke up, the first thing I did was go and find this little tiny Bible on the bookshelf at the Gateway Detox, and just started reading it.
Aren't you the one that when you woke up, you had a dude that looked like Jesus?
Okay, so there was this room, I think it's what they called it, a drunk tank. And so I was sleeping, and I woke up, and there was this man in the bed next to me, not in the same bed, but the bed that was next to me, but he had long scraggly hair, looked just like Jesus. He was covered in tattoos, and I just remember opening my eyes. I'm like, Jesus, is that you? It was not Jesus.
Right.
But I found a Bible and started reading it there, and I think that's whenever I really started listening for his voice. I wasn't even sure what voice I had heard in the woods. It wasn't until I started reading the Bible and hearing that voice through the scripture that I realized that it was God speaking to me. And then I ended up getting saved. I really consider getting saved the day that I cried out for God. But it was the next Sunday. I think I got to the rehab in Alabama. My parents picked me up from detox and drove me to the Foundry in Alabama, and that's where I spent the next year. But that next Sunday, I got there on a Friday, so 2 days later is whenever I gave my life over to Christ and decided to do it the right way. I'd been to rehab 3 other times before this. This was the changing point, because I didn't do it on my own strength, because like that's not something that anybody can do on their own strength.
Right. So the time before that, I know you went to another rehab,
Mm-hmm.
and you ended up leaving. Like, why? What happened?
I think I was more concerned with everything that was going on out here and less concerned with myself. I had to reach a point where I literally could not fall any further to want to get help, and I think that's where I was at too.
Did you go because your parents wanted you to go?
No, I hadn't spoken to my parents in 6 months. I mean, I wasn't really even expecting you to tell me that they were picking me up from detox.
Right.
I was expecting for you guys to find somewhere for me to go. So when they called and picked me up, I was extremely surprised. I reached a point where I was ready, and I think that's what it takes.
Because the time before that, like, not when you went to the Foundry.
The time before that.
The time before that, did you go for somebody else?
I think, you know what, I was really sick, and I had an infection in my arm, and I went to the hospital, and me and my daughter's dad had gotten in this huge fight, and I thought that I was alone, so I called my family, and then of course this was the first time that I had really called them since I went off the deep end. So they all swooped in and bought me all new clothes, and like took extra care of me, and then begged me to go to rehab. So that's where I went.
And
they dropped me off in Alabama the first time, and a week later I was back in Florida.
On 103rd.
On 103rd Street.
In a tent.
In a tent. Right back to it. And then I stayed there for another 6 months. But during that 6 months,
that's when you were cut off.
That's whenever they did not speak to me anymore. They were extremely mad.
Right. And, that has a lot to do with enabling is such a big part of drug addiction that I know I had, we have kids out there. James and I have kids out there that are alcoholics and drug addicts. And it's so hard to be like, no, I can't help you. But I want to. Anyways. I want to help, but I just can't.
I understand it.
Because I don't want to kill them. You baby the addict, you bury the addict.
That's true, though. My parents sent me money for a really long time. I would call my dad every morning, and he would Western Union me $60 because I'd convinced him that Suboxone on the street was $30 a piece. And so every morning, and he didn't want me sick, so he thought he was helping me. And so he would send me $60 every single day, and I would go buy 3 bags of heroin. And he eventually stopped doing that, but then about once a week I could call him and he would do it. And then it became like once every 2 weeks. And then it was once a month. And then he was just like, no, every time I called him. And then he just stopped answering my phone calls.
Right. Because he was going to be living in the tent with you.
Right. But I did that with every single family member. It wasn't just my dad. Like, they all had a different period. Like, so my mom never sent me a dime. She would not do it.
All right. So we're going to take a break and we'll be right back.
Hi, we're Rich and Lee Norton with the Hands and Feet Foundation. Hands and Feet is a wonderful ministry where we serve on the west side of Jacksonville, Florida.
And this is a ministry that's near and dear to our heart. There's so many wonderful things that happen out there. Come to 7478 103rd Street, Jacksonville, Florida, or you can go to handsandfeetfoundation.org, or if you want to go to Facebook, Hands and Feet Westside. Come and see what we do. Check us out if you'd like to give or if you'd like to donate your time, whatever it may be. I mean, we're just loving this ministry. Love for you to be part of it as well.
All right, we're back. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was the people, places, and things. And you always hear that. If you're in any kind of drug addiction, drug rehab, or whatever, and you can't just do one, you have to do all of them.
Yeah.
Have you tried just doing one?
Yeah, I have tried doing just one. So I'll start with the first one. The first rehab I went to was here in Jacksonville, and it was just on the other side of town. And that lasted, I think the first time I went, it lasted like 3 days until they started to weaning me off the Suboxone. And then I just wasn't having it anymore.
Right.
But I was only like 15 miles away. So I just asked someone for some money and hopped a bus and was back over here in less than 30 minutes.
Right.
So the next time I decided to change the places, and I went up to the rehab in Alabama. But I was still in contact with my daughter's dad.
So they let you have phones?
No, they didn't let me have a phone, but they let me have contact. Like they had a public phone that you could use, and it was monitored. But I shouldn't have been able to use a phone
Right.
my first night there, and so because I only stayed 2 days, and then I got in contact with my daughter's dad, and somehow ended up back in Jacksonville the next day, which could have gone horribly wrong. I'm just glad that I got here safe.
Right, because what did you do to get back here?
I mean, I hitchhiked. So someone dropped me off at a truck stop in Pell City, Alabama, and I walked around for 4 hours at this truck stop until I found someone that was willing to drive me to Atlanta and pay for my bus ticket from Atlanta to Jacksonville. But that drive from Pell City to Atlanta is 2 hours. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, I could have just been thrown out of the
Right.
truck in the woods. It could have ended so badly. But I got here safe.
Oh, God.
But God, right. The last time I changed everything. So I was willing to give up anything that I had here in Jacksonville. I was willing to give up anyone I had here in Jacksonville, and I was willing to give up everything I had here. So I moved up there with the intention that I might not ever move back to Florida, and both of my kids are here. So even still, like, it's been almost 2 years. April will be 2 years, so it's been a year and a half that I've had clean, and I still struggle with whether I should move back to Florida or not. And my daughter and my son are both here. I get to come back and visit now. I get to see both of them. I probably come back once every 2 months, but I stay for a week, and I'm already ready to go back to Alabama. Because even just being back here on 103rd, I'm passing all of the old places that I swore that I should never be around again.
Right.
And I'm firmly rooted in God, and I strongly believe that it won't be a problem, but it very well could.
Right. Because you're still in there.
Because I'm still in
Right.
here. God's in here, but I'm still in here. And I guess I'm still afraid that if I stayed
Yes.
around too long, that I could slip up.
Yes.
So I stay in Alabama.
That even though it is a struggle, but you know what's right.
Right.
You know, at least you have the clarity to be able to say, I probably shouldn't go back
Right.
there.
Even being 2 states away, I'm a better mother than the mother that I could possibly be if I moved back here and messed up,
Right. Exactly.
which was non-existent. I still have to answer questions to my son about why I disappeared. So
Yeah. It'll come. Because I know my kids didn't talk to me for years.
we've already had the conversation. He said he forgave me, but he thinks that I was sick. So I mean, he's 7, so that's. And I was sick. He's right. But we've talked about it, and he said that he forgave me for disappearing. Just don't ever do it again. So
Yes, sir.
that's what I do. And I FaceTime him every day, so he gets to see me every day. And then once every 2 months, I'll come down for a week. So, and he knows that I'm going to keep those promises now.
So, how about the healthy and unhealthy relationships?
So that's still something that I have to watch out for. I had just gotten out of, so I spent 9 months inpatient at the Foundry, which is the rehab up in Alabama. And then for the last 3 months, I moved out and stayed with my aunt, got a job, got a car, and started living my life. But I would still come back and take random drug tests. At that point, I was really given free reins, and I'm making my own friendships outside of the protection of this rehab.
Right.
And so I got into a relationship with this guy. And he was also in recovery. He said that he had like 2 years clean time.
Oh, okay. So there's a story right there. So what are the rules for the Foundry?
Oh. So you're not supposed to date people that are previous graduates of the Foundry, but hold on. He had been graduated like 5 years. I thought there was a statute of limitations on that rule. There was not a statute of limitations on that rule. So I ended up getting in trouble for it and had my graduation extended, but we'll get to that. Anyway, I dated this guy. He said he had 2 years clean time. Went through the same program as me. And I came down here for a visit with my kids, and he started acting weird. And when I got back to Alabama, actually on my drive back to Alabama, he told me that he had relapsed. So I went over to his hotel that he was staying at to talk to him, and he put a crack pipe in my hand and put a lighter in my hand. And I mean, I've been clean for almost a year at this point. Like, I thought that I had it kicked. And I got so close. I had it in my mouth. I was so close to relapsing. And I, again, heard God tell me that I could still say no. And I ended up throwing it out the window. But that could have gone a whole different direction. And so that was March of this year. And I just got a call 2 days ago that he had died. So had I chosen a different direction, I could have been right there with him. And it's always right there at my door.
It's crazy how many times when we think about it, God's hand is all in our lives.
Everything. For some reason, the devil wants to take me out really bad.
Right. It's because we're working for Jesus.
That's what it is.
So, your graduation got postponed.
So, whenever he did that, I freaked out. And I went back. His mother was a mentor at the Foundry. So I went back and talked to the women's director and told her what happened. I'm like, hey, I don't even know if she knows. His mother knows that he's relapsed. Will you talk to her, because he's still contacting me and I've told him to stop? Which backfired on me. They were like, you know, he graduated 5 years ago, right? From here. And I was like, yeah, I know that. And they were like, you know, that's breaking the rule. They almost dismissed me, and I almost got kicked out of the program, which would have stopped any kind of custody battle that I had for my son. I would have had to start completely over, because one of the requirements to get my son back was to finish a program. So, I mean, they didn't do that. They just extended my graduation 2 months, but it almost, like, put a wrench in everything for me that I'd worked really hard for. So, unhealthy relationship.
Yes. Toxic people.
So, I don't think that you shouldn't hang around with people that are also in recovery, because I relate to people like that. I'm just more aware of red flags and the ways people are acting now. That
Right.
would tell me that they're not in recovery anymore.
Yeah.
And I'm
You know,
more
'cause-
willing to get rid of people that are toxic like that than to stay around because I want friends.
And you want to live.
Right.
You know, because, you know, we're drug addicts. We can look at people and be like, no.
I know
I
what you're
think I'll
doing.
pass on that.
Yeah.
I think you had a post on your Facebook the other day that said, I'll pass on the relapse.
Right. It says, as much as I like posing for mug shots and begging my family for bail money, I think I'll pass on the relapse.
Right. Amen.
That's exactly what would happen.
Okay.
And my mom gave me a house key to her house. Like, I don't really want to give it back. They trust me to go in their house. My dad's wife told me to go in her house and get something for her the other day while they were at work. They would have never done that before.
It felt kind of weird.
Yeah, my dad let me drive his car.
I know one time I went in somewhere and they was like, go ahead. And I was like,
Are you sure?
Lord, please don't let anybody break in this house
Like,
after I leave.
I'm still expecting my family to, like, grab their purse when I walk by and pull it closer. They don't do that anymore.
I know.
Or if they do, I don't see it.
My mom, right. My mom used to lock her stuff in a safe.
Yeah.
James did too. I feel like, you know, we can get into
I'm
anything.
thrifty.
I mean, I'd take a hammer and an ice pick, and I would be
Oh,
knocking
no,
the-
I've never done
knocking-
that. But that's a good idea.
I'd be knocking little slits out. Don't even mess with the combination part.
Yeah, just break the whole thing. You don't even care if they know you went in it.
Okay, so...
We got off subject.
Yes, sorry. So, you're staying in Alabama. What do you do?
So I work at Longhorn Steakhouse, but I've been there for January will be a year, and I've already been told that I may get a promotion to management. So, I mean, I could do that with any Longhorn. So even if I wanted to transfer down the road, way down the road, back down here to Florida, that's something that I could do
Right.
down here. But I think that it's just, I was sleeping in a tent in the woods a year and a half ago. And to have as nice of a car as I do now,
Right.
and to have a relationship with my kids or any of my family members, and to have a career
Right.
like that in my future is just a God thing.
And you make pretty good money.
And I do make pretty good money. I'm able to afford to come down here every 2 months. And
Right.
I'm able to take care of my son and send his dad money to take care of him and get him stuff when he needs it. I'm saving so that way if it is ever in my future to have my children back, I'll have a savings account to be able to take care of them. And then I'm paying off that car, which I'm really proud of.
Awesome. That's great. Alrighty. Tell everybody bye. Bye.
Bye.
Listen, man, we just get some of your